there's just so much pressure on all of us to be perfect. I think also for men too, by the way. I don't think this pressure is on just women. That I think I just also want to remind people, do you really want to be that perfect? Because think about the characters you watch. Imagine if a character is super perfect and they did everything right. They made all the right choices, picked all the right men, ate right all the right food. Would you even want to watch that character? Like you'd be like, okay, boring, enough, you know? So why don't we give ourselves the same kind of grace to be messy? I feel like that's what makes us lovable.
My guest today is Sheila, an Iranian American woman and the creator and host of Small Talk with Sheila, a rom-com meets real life podcast about chasing joy, creativity, and being the main character of your own life. A lot of people know Sheila as a design operations leader at tech giants like Meta and Slack, but she is way more than just her corporate resume. She's a storyteller, a creator, and a woman that has navigated the heavy transition of divorce and a deep pressure of being the daughter of first-generation immigrants. In this episode, we dive into why Sheila walked away from a career in film, how she balances the need for stability with a hunger for creativity, and how can both coexist. Also, we talk about her relationship with her own family. This is a conversation about finding joy, your own voice, and the choice to stay kind, even when things in the world feel very heavy right now. Let's get started. Yay, Sheila. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am excited to be here.
How would you describe yourself for someone that doesn't know you?
For someone that doesn't know me, I am a very creative person. I like to think funny. I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I am a friend, I'm passionate, I am enthusiastic, and I will say that I just always try to live my life by being kind.
I love that. Sheila, you're from Iran. I do have to start with the question of how are you feeling right now with everything that is happening, which is, I can't even imagine how heavy it is. And it's important to acknowledge it as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, just for a little bit of context, my parents immigrated to the US when I was just a baby. So, I grew up here, but I was born in Iran. I speak Farsi. All of my extended family, besides a few cousins, all still live in Iran. So, this is deeply personal. And I think for any Iranian, it's been a really challenging couple of months, both like a lot of ups and downs. I think that, I've talked a lot about it. I think one of the things that it actually has been like interesting about this time, and I think is that people are starting to realize that the Iranian people are not the government itself. And I think for a long time, those two would get meshed together. And so I think in that way, it's really nice for people to start seeing that. But of course, it's very challenging to see what is happening. I think we are all going through the ups and downs of like, okay, this is it. They're going to be free, and then obviously what that entails and whatnot. So thank you so much for asking. It even I think the best way I can even describe it is regardless of what you're seeing in the news and headlines and whatnot. It's Friday, and we have a family group chat with my family in Iran. And the last we've even heard from them is Sunday. A cousin of mine in Canada just put a message like, whoever sees this, please let us know you're okay. And we still haven't heard from them. So I think that's like also the very human experience of what it feels like to be an Iranian, not in Iran right now.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And I really hope the best for your family. I know that sounds so superficial, but
Yeah.
I really do.
I do. I wish the best of peace. I was telling a friend of mine, I was like, I know it's so innocent, but I just want peace in the world and peace in the Middle East. Like I just um Betty, honestly. And that's
Yes.
what I pray
It's a hard time for not only Iran, a lot of
for.
situations in the world right now that are extremely complicated to process.
Yeah.
Thank you for acknowledging that. I wanna switch to the work that you're doing and the reason that we met, which I love, which is your podcast, Small Talk with
Mhm.
Sheila. I find it so wonderful. Bring so much personality to the podcast and energy. And I'm curious to start on why did you start the podcast in the first place and the context that you were in your own life when you
Yeah,
started.
for sure. Happy to do that. So again, I think this is very relevant. I come from immigrant parents. And they came here to give me this like amazing life. I think in their dreams, I was going to be a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer. And I came into this world very creative. I came like at a very young age. I discovered acting and theater, and that was my love and my passion. And my mom was like, "Oh my gosh, no!" It's funny. I was just recently telling somebody. Yeah, I think the first time my parents took me, my mom took me to Iran. I was around 6 or 7 years old, and then we would go to a lot of Persian restaurants in California, and there was belly dancers, and I loved belly dancers because they had like costumes, and and they make so much money. So the first time my mom took me to Iran, they asked kids, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I was like, "I'd be a belly dancer." And my mom was like, "Oh, no." There's nothing wrong with belly dancing, by the way.
I love that. Yeah.
But, like, I just wanna say, like, sometimes your parents want, like, a safer route for you, and I was very creative. And so for most of my life, I've toggled between trying to make them happy, but also making myself happy. So I've worked in the entertainment industry for a little bit, also working in tech. And, so at one point, I was like, "Okay, I want the stability of, the things that they taught me." And so I'd been in tech for a good amount of time, almost a decade, and I realized, like, oh my gosh, there's this like whole side of me that's missing, this creative, expressive side of me. And as much as I was trying to bring it into my work, it just wasn't the same. And so I like to say, I built the house literally. I had bought a house, I'd done all those things, but it felt empty. And so that's why I was like, what can I do? And I think in the beginning it was going to be a video series. I didn't know. It was just like small talk with Sheila. I think I got some cameras, and then one day on my walk, I was like, a podcast. I'm going to do a podcast. And that was a little over a year ago. I had no idea what I was doing. I think someone was like selling this like PDF of how to start a podcast, so I purchased it for like 199. I don't know, and I bought a mic, and then I went down that road to create Small Talk with Sheila. Yeah, and it's very story driven. It's very personal to me and my life, and a lot of that is actually very intentional in terms of the feeling and what I wanted to create.
Yeah. I love that in every episode you tell a different story about yourself.
Mhm.
And it's not only hard to start a podcast, but actually putting your own stories out there and your own face. Like I know a lot of creators struggle with that.
Right.
Has it been hard for you or has it
Mm,
been more natural to share, for example, how you met your husband or the your divorce life
yeah.
when you went back to Iran, etc.?
Yeah. Well, I like share personal stories because I think I learn from personal stories the most. That's when I connect to people, like podcasts like yourself, arrivals. And so I don't know, I felt like that's how I wanted people to take away lessons. And the best way that I could, almost like you're a friend and you're talking to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I get it. Like, let me tell you about my life. I will say that a lot, like, I share a lot and a lot of personal stories. I don't go into the super detail of every single one. I think my divorce story is a perfect example. I wanted to share it because I know people have gone through it. Some of the topics I talked about, I think, are very relatable, but it was very important to me that I didn't necessarily share. There was an amount of respect I have for part of my life, and I didn't necessarily need to bring out like my laundry, if that makes sense. So it's just I shape my stories in a way to help somebody. And I guess a good way of saying it is like, sitting in an airport bar, and you just start talking to people, right? And you're going to share enough of the story for them to get the gist of it without sharing every single detail of it. So I think that's a way that I protect myself. And there's always an intention behind the story. There's a lesson in the story that I'm sharing. So I think that helps a lot. I will say social media is a little bit has been even that part feels a little bit makes sense for me and it's a little more controlled. Social media is a little bit hard because you are sharing more of yourself. I'm out there more. And then my friends and my family and my colleagues are all kind of watching me. So sometimes
Right.
that part is even more challenging because there's, as you know, like people just want to get to know you. And so, like, what do you share? How do you share? When do you share? I think another perfect example is just even what's happening in Iran. There's times where things are happening in your personal life, and like, how do you figure out? I do feel like in lots of ways, a lot of us are now public figures, and we need to like have we're our own publicists, and like how do you navigate that? That's been challenging.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And like you say, yeah, in social media, of course, we're human, and social media is all about validation, which can be very tough sometimes. Part of the reason also that you mentioned before, there's a lot of stereotypes about Iranians, like there's a lot of stereotypes about Mexican people, of course, and
Mhm,
I
yeah.
have to face that. How did that influence at all also in how you share yourself, how you share your stories?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that part is really important to me because I think that there are stereotypes of like let's say of being Iranian, and I feel like I get to break that stereotype, but in also very real ways. I think in one of my episodes, I don't know, I shared that like Iranian food is not my favorite. Persian food is not my favorite food. Like I like it, like don't get me wrong, but like I really love Italian food or and whatnot. So I think that like those are also smaller stereotypes that we get to I think as immigrants too. Like you're supposed to love every single thing about your culture. And there's also things about my culture that I don't necessarily agree with or like. And I think that's okay because at the end of the day, I'm like a human. So I think that that's why it is so important for us to be honest and authentic and real because I think that's when people can also relate to us. Because 'cause I'm sure there's someone out there that also like, their cultural cuisine is not their favorite cuisine, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Not my case, but yes,
Yeah.
I know a
Not
lot
looking
of
a
people
bear,
that
but
do.
I
Mm.
think it
Yeah,
happens.
yes, totally. I want to go back and talk about the relationship that you have with your parents, which
Mhm.
you have mentioned several times.
Yeah.
And you've been in the US for pretty much your entire life.
Mhm.
But at what point did you started to understand from them their immigration story and why they decided to come to the US? Like how old were you and what was the narrative of your parents to you about that? I'm curious.
Yeah. I think my dad was able we had come to the US. My uncle had lived in the US and we had come here on a lot of these are stories, so it's interesting to me to retell the stories that I heard. But we had come to the US just to visit my uncle. My dad, there was a company he had worked with previously, and they're like, "Oh, come talk to us." And then they were like, "We'll give you a job and we'll sponsor your green cards," which at the time I remember hearing as a kid, I was like, "Oh, what's the big deal?" And now, like, looking back, I'm like, "Oh, that was a really big deal moment for them." I remember my mom didn't get to go back home, and my dad went back to Tehran. He said, "I think we should take this opportunity, at least for a few years, let things die down in Iran." I think back then people still had hope that things would change, and my mom just didn't even get to go back, and so I grew up with a mom that it was like, can you imagine, like, just being, like, in her 20s with this young kid? My dad, obviously was working, like, 12, 14 hours a day, and I like to also remind people she wasn't as connected as we are today. Like, there was no phones or FaceTime or, social media. I still remember I was 3 or 4 and there was these calling cards and she would call back home and maybe talk to her family for 10 minutes or she would write, letters to them and it would take weeks for it to like so I think the narrative I heard or I saw is like how it wasn't easy for them. It really wasn't easy. My dad working so much, my mom feeling very isolated so much of the time. And I think in that way I have really I haven't taken it for granted, the fact that they made so many sacrifices to give me a better life, and, I still do. Maybe it's not the way they necessarily, quote, unquote, "wanted me to not want me to," and I have a voice and I get to use it. I get to share my personal stories and help people and have a platform. I wouldn't have been able to do any of that if they didn't like make that decision and they weren't willing to like sacrifice being away from their families and the life that they had known. So I think, yeah, I think that answers your question. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yes, it does. Um, and I do want to touch on like how well you seem very close to them.
Hmm.
And you've talked about this a little bit, but did that relationship, that closeness, do you think grew with time because you started to understand all this, that the sacrifices that they made and all they went through to
Yeah.
give opportunities for you, you grew closer, you felt more in debt to them as well?
Yeah, I definitely have felt, definitely done a lot of therapy around this, but I've definitely felt, and I don't know, it's interesting to me to see if other like immigrant stories resemble this, but I have felt indebted to make them happy. And it took me a lot of time and a lot of therapy to know that my role as their daughter is to respect them and to love them. But my role as their daughter is not to make them happy. I think this is a really important lesson we all have to at some point learn, that we all have our own path, and it's not our job to make anyone else necessarily happy. And I think that's when you get into relationships that might be like dysfunctional, because at the end of the day we have to take ownership of our own happiness. But I think as an immigrant, that desire and that need, especially knowing that your parents sacrificed so much, is even greater. And so maybe you need a little bit more therapy or whatnot. It's a challenge that you have to go through. I think I've always been very close to them. I think we've just had ebbs and flows of our relationship where I really was like, "I'm not gonna do what you say," or like, "Okay, I'm gonna do what you say." I think it's been that, but I think our love and our closeness, has never been different, and I think for, like, to give them credit after being in America for so long, I think, like, they've really grown and evolved as well, and they've really understood this concept of, like, me following my own path is not trying to make them unhappy. It's just me following my own path. I think we've all evolved as a relationship. I think another context that will kind of be helpful for listeners too is I'm an only child as well. So there, like, it's also like only child syndrome too, where it's like I'm it, like, all their dreams and their hopes are in me, or I don't have like the sibling that could, like, I don't know, be the mess, quote unquote, the mess for a while, and they just are like paying attention to that sibling. Like, it's just me. And so I think that,
Right. Yeah. Yes, I was gonna ask you if you have siblings.
yeah.
I think you must not be alone here, of course, that child of immigrants
Mm,
feel this way more
mhm.
than the immigrants that have gone somewhere else without their parents, and not that they don't respect their own parents. But
Yeah.
that relationship is different, I
Yeah.
think. And just the idea that they had for you that a corporate job would be the best. Well, I don't know if you're comfortable also telling the story that when you started to get more involved in the theater,
Mm,
your dad felt a lot of anxiety around that.
right.
And do you want to tell the
Yeah,
story?
for sure. Yeah, happy to. I think it was actually, I was in the entertainment industry. I was in the film industry. I was working for some producers that were making like really big time independent films, a lot of films that you guys have known, winning Oscars and whatnot. But to my parents, they just like, to that at the time, I remember my job was really, it was great. It was like really hard to get this job, but yeah, I didn't necessarily have health benefits, or, like, my salary wasn't really high, but I was, getting to go to all the like Sundance and all the film festivals and all. So there was like a clout to my job, but it wasn't the sort of clout that, quote unquote, like made sense to my parents. And being in Hollywood, if anyone has been in Hollywood, is also very challenging. And I remember I went through this period of time where, I was advocating for myself, and I was in a company with like all guys, and I was really trying to push forward and all of that. And I was being like met with some resistance, just going through the challenges of working in LA, which I should do a whole episode about because that's like, I have some great stories there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I remember at the time, like, my dad started having these anxiety attacks, and so, like, he was going like and I was like, "Why is my dad having anxiety attacks?" And then my mom was like, "He's just really worried about you." And I was like, "Well, why is he worried about me?" And then he was like, "He's worried that you don't have the stability that he's wanted for you." And in that moment, I had to make a decision, and in that moment, it felt like the right, because here I am in entertainment, grinding and hustling, and some things are going well and some things are not. And here's my parents and feeling like this incredible guilt for them. And I was like, you know what? Maybe it's time for me to like pack my bags, like, pack up that little dream, put it aside for now and go and be with them. And I did. I went back to the Bay Area where my parents are from and got a corporate job, ended up working, in tech, and got a job at Meta, which made them very happy, and followed that path. And, I will say this, like, and I think it's important for me to share my story. I don't regret that decision either. I think there's parts, I think as you navigate, like, you're like, "Oh, it's not like everything they said to me was wrong or bad for me. Actually, there was a lot of amazing things that happened in that path and in that journey that I wouldn't have had following this other journey. I don't know, So it did, I do value stability now. And I think even in this world of creatives and content and whatnot, there's like a couple of camps to go. Like you can quit everything, go full time and do that. Or you could figure out a way to do both. I think right now people are having like dual careers. It's not even a side hustle anymore. It's like a dual career. And honestly, that feels better to me because the stability I have allows me to be creative because there's things I don't have to worry about. Like if I was in a certain path, like, yeah, you worry about your health, like your benefits, your financials, like all that stuff. I don't have to worry about that because I have stability. So I think there's different paths, and I think going that direction like wasn't necessarily a wrong path for me, and I in lots of ways I'm happy that I did it. And I've met
Yeah,
amazing, incredible people, I mean, along the way, like, I mean, even working at Meta and even being at Slack, like, I'm around such, like, smart, talented, like, human beings. That's a very inspiring, in itself, and to be around that feels really amazing.
totally. And I absolutely relate to that. The life in
Mhm.
tech can be consuming and overwhelming, but you do meet so many
Mhm.
amazing people, and the world of tech changes so much, and
Yeah,
that keeps it interesting as well. And you're right, like both things can be true. You can have this stability, and that gives peace of mind in so many ways,
right.
especially living in the US where everything
Yeah.
is healthcare and everything is expensive, and
Yeah.
you are doing both things. But
Yeah.
that's not something that we grew up
Yeah.
learning,
Yeah.
and this creative side of us that we tend to put aside and ignore.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing. Like, I think I don't mind my parents instilling the value of stability to me, but maybe like if I had to go back and I was able to change things around, maybe if they could just teach me that I could do both. Like, I think for a long time I felt like I had to choose between one or the other. And now I'm learning I don't. And I think like if anything, maybe that's what I would wish for them, that they were like, okay, you could still do this. Like be creative and you could still do this. Like, I don't know if they were equipped with the knowledge, like no fault of their own, to set that stage for me. So I always felt like I had to make a decision.
Yeah. Yes. I think a lot of older generations, and not that this generation is like so different, but the
Yeah.
more you go back, the less common it is
Yeah.
to explore that side of yourself. And I'm thinking of the book, The Artist's Way, and how
Mm,
it gives you so many tools to explore that inner child and your
yeah.
creativity.
I've done the artist way. I love the art.
Yes. What would you say to someone that has this constant struggle with their parents
Mm,
about, and I'm not saying you have it now, but I'm saying like how do we think about satisfying them
yeah.
constantly? And with some parents is like no matter what you do, you're never gonna make them proud.
Yeah.
But we it's a worry that we have as adults, and I have it, and
Yeah.
it can be very heavy to base our life decisions in that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I still have it all the time. So I think I just want to make that very real. I think your relationship with your family is one of the most unique relationships because they're your family. Like you can't break up with you. I mean, it could be dramatic and you could break up, but at the end of the day, they're your family and you can't just cast them aside, right? And so I think that's just very real. I still probably have it, especially when you're close to them. It's like, you don't mom, you don't understand. Or, she's like, you don't understand. So I just want to make that very real and validating for folks that it doesn't just go away. Like, it's not a magic wand and it's like, now it's all fixed. I think a couple lessons that I learned along the way, again, I would say just like from therapy, from coaching, was this concept. I alluded to it before, but happiness. And I learned that, or in a different way, like my parents, and for the most part, if you're lucky enough, your family wants the best for you, right? They want the best for you. The flip side of that and the truth behind that is while they want the best for you, they don't know what the best for you is. And that's your decision. That's on you. And I think like that's what I mean for the happiness. So being able to understand both, because it's very easy to be like, you don't understand me, you don't get me, and like almost like have this negative connotation, right? But you have to come from a place of like they love you and they want the best for you. And then you also have to take responsibility for knowing that only you know what's best for you. And I think if you really instill that in your life, it'll save you a lot of heartache. And then also, too, I think as I'm getting older, I'm learning I don't have to explain myself so much. I don't have to get everyone on board and get everyone to like follow my Sheila's philosophy on life. Like, I don't have to. And I think when you're younger, you try to make that happen. Sometimes it's simply just stating what you want, going after it, and that's all you need to do. You don't need to explain to them, like, "Why am I doing this? Why do I love this? Why?" You just are like, "This is what I'm doing, and I need you to trust me that I am doing what's best for me," and keep it as simple as that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Following our intuition
Yeah.
in that sense. And you're right, over explaining,
Mhm.
especially as women, we do so much. And yes, families are extremely important. The relationship with your family can be also the most complicated relationship you can
Yes.
have.
Yes.
And I want to touch on a story that you told in one episode of your podcast
Mhm.
with your mom, because I really loved what she did for you here. And it was when you were going through your divorce.
Mhm.
And I highly recommend listening to this episode. Feeling absolutely frustration, of course, of everything that was happening. And you expressed to your mom, I just want to break something. And she kind of
Mhm.
gave you the permission, even though, of course, you don't that
Mhm.
permission, but you did that with her. And to this day, I think that was a very
Yeah. Yeah,
good
it's making me emotional.
experience.
Yeah, so it was very shortly after my divorce. I still remember it. I was back at my parents' house and I was like trying to get my a room set up for myself and like my mom came in and I was just like, "Mom, I'm so angry. I just want to break things. I want to break something." And I was just crying. My mom just stood there like, she was behind me and she said, "Okay." And I didn't know what was happening. I was in tears, like, I was like a whirlwind and she literally scooped me up and we went downstairs and she took me to her china cabinet and we picked I didn't even know what was happening, but we picked like really expensive crystal, champagne. I don't know what it was. And then she took me to the backyard and she's like, throw it, just break it. And I And I was like, "What? Is she going crazy? Like, what?" And then finally I just threw it, and I just remember it, like, just splattering everywhere, like, like the broken pieces of my heart. And so I yeah, and it was just this very beautiful moment that my mom allowed me to express anger, to express disappointment, to express like the brokenness of me in that moment in a very real way. My mom hasn't listened to all my episodes, but she did listen to that one, and she told me like how she remembers that moment and how it made her cry. And yeah, it was just a beautiful moment with her, and highly encourage
Yeah.
breaking things.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very and then I
Yeah.
think another part of that story that was still very at the end of it, I was just so tired, and I went for a nap, and she actually swept away all of the broken glass for me, which was, like, such a loving thing to do.
Yes. It made me want to break something immediately after I heard you. And I loved it. And that's
Thank you.
something that I think it's rare. And I think it's the fact that someone just listens to you and helps you go through something
Yeah,
so hard in a very supporting, I'm not gonna judge you, I'm just here
yeah.
to be with you way. And
Yeah, and I think I'm really glad that you brought up that story because we're talking about families and the complicatedness of that relationship. And I just want to remind people that, there's always like, yes, there's parts of me that she doesn't understand, but then there's also parts of me that she really does understand. And it doesn't have to be either or. And I think that's sometimes when family resentment comes the most, when we think it's like either or, and realizing that there are times that our family gets us more than anybody and gives us that grace on certain things, and we can take that.
yes, absolutely. I think because it's such an important relationship, we can see it very black and white.
Yeah,
And when we judge them, and we forget about those good parts that they
yeah,
also have given us. And on this note, I do want to talk about love, romantic love,
yes,
and you also have an episode sharing this. I don't want to go through the whole
yeah.
story, but I do want to touch like a little bit in the middle that
Okay.
between divorce and meeting your current husband. I feel like you're very positive, and I envy that. I want to be more. What gives you that? Would you say in your own personality?
Yeah, the being positive. Well, first of all, I have a dog. Her name is Love. And when I was very bitter after my divorce, a friend of mine reminded me, and I was like, I don't like, I just don't. I'm not always positive, but, I was like, "I don't believe in love anymore. I don't believe in marriage anymore. I don't believe in these things." Like, and she said, "Of course you do. You named your dog Love. You believe in love." My whole premise of my podcast is rom-coms, and rom-coms are all about love. And so obviously it's still in me. But I guess I will say that it's very easy to have negative experiences in life and just think that there's a domino effect and everything is gonna be negative. And I really try to and really work on myself to know that each experience is unique. So whether you had a bad experience at work or with a friend or with someone you loved, it doesn't mean your next job or your next friend or the next person you love like has to have that same experience. So I think it's not like blinded optimism necessarily, but it's in like just like sometimes you just have to let that be in your past and then like move forward with a little bit of with innocence, like with like children, like children, that's how they live if you think about it. It's like they get hurt and they get back up and then they're like do the same thing and they don't think they're going to fall the next time. And so I think that's what optimism is. It's not just like everything's going to work out, everything's great. And I'm like, I like manifest this to the universe, so this is going to happen. It's not that. I think, I think optimism is bringing back a little bit of your childlike innocence to your life.
Right. Yes. Curiosity that we
Mhm.
sometimes also leave aside and that bravery as well, because when you met your current husband, you took the initiative and
Mhm.
you texted him, and from there
Mhm.
it was a total rom-com, which I
Totally.
love. Yeah. How long you been together at this point?
4 years. 4 years together.
Mm.
Yeah.
And where does this love for rom-coms come from? I think is it because you were watching rom-coms when you were very young, and then just like you wanted to be in one? What was
Yeah.
about them?
I'm trying to like, I think I watched a lot more soap operas when I was young with my mom. So, I think I remember playing as a kid and I was like a single mom or something because I'd seen it in a soap opera. So I don't know. I feel like I'm a lot of times like awkward and messy and I don't quite know what I'm doing and sometimes I say the wrong things, but I really just try really hard. I want to be a better person, but I still like sometimes eat ice cream in bed when I shouldn't, and I'm trying to not eat as much sugar, like all those kinds of things. And so I always just sort of saw myself as a rom-com character, things that would happen to me. I'm a writer first and foremost, so I think that like as a writer, you kind of witness your life in a different way too. It's hard to explain, but sometimes like you're just having this out of body experience when you're a writer because you could see the story in what you're living. And so I think that I've always had that. And then I really do love rom com characters because they're not perfect. They're always messy characters, I talk a lot about Bridget Jones and how awkward she is and whatnot, but she's so lovable. She's so much fun to
You
watch.
know,
The messier they are, the more fun it is to watch, the more invested you are in their journey, and especially in this day and age, when there is so much, with social media pressure on being perfect in every single like, whether it's our morning routine, our supplements, what we eat, how we look, our hair, our makeup. The other day, I was, like, not wearing bronzer, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not wearing bronzer today," and I was like, "You know what? There was, like, many years I never wore bronzer." Like, bronzer is kind of like a newer thing, you know what I mean? And, like, there's just so much pressure on all of us to be perfect. I think also for men too, by the way. I don't think this pressure is on just women. That I think I just also wanna remind people, do you really wanna be that perfect? Because think about the characters you watch. Imagine if a character is super perfect and they did everything right. They made all the right choices, picked all the right men, ate all the right food. Would you even wanna watch that character? Like, you'd be like, "Okay, boring, enough," you know? So why don't we give ourselves the same kind of grace to be messy? I feel like that's what makes us lovable.
yes, totally agree with that.
Yeah, and I think the rom-com genre just does such a great job in creating those characters, and so I think that's why I love rom-coms so much.
I love it too. They might be my favorite, and I feel like, especially yes, those '90s movies that
Um,
I may see less and less, or maybe I'm not seeing current rom-coms these days.
yeah.
But yes, like Bridget Jones, or more like a show like Gilmore Girls, which
Yeah,
is so lovable.
yeah.
And you're working on your own rom-com, right?
Yes. So me
Yes.
and one of my best friends, we're writing actually a Persian inspired rom-com and it's about two best friends. I feel like it's a little more her story than my story, but obviously about, trying to find love in this age. And so I think what's really unique about it. First of all, I don't think there's been a lot of movies about Iranians, that isn't based on like I know there's like some of the darker ones, but there hasn't just been like a movie just based on like real people living in their existence and yet that being their culture or none that I've really seen. So I think that's what we also really want to do with it. Although it is about like dating Persian men and like all like our culture and bringing out elements, the good and the bad of our culture. It's not necessarily about politics or belief it's just two girls living a very real human existence.
I love that. What is it like to date a Persian man, by the way, now
So
that you mention
I've
it?
never dated a Persian guy ever. I don't know why. Like I've never dated a Persian guy, but I do talk about this. My Persian friends, all they want to do is date Persian men. And then but then they get really frustrated by Persian men. But then, like, that's what like, me and my friend, she'll definitely listen to this and she'll laugh. Like, I'm always like she's like, "I have to marry a Persian guy." There's, like, dating apps that are just for Persians, by the way. So, like, that's what she's very focused on, and I'm like, "You can be happy with any culture," but I do understand people wanna be connected to their culture, and I think sometimes there is an allure to being with someone from the same culture, especially in this day and age where you do become a little bit more disconnected to maybe, like, uphold some of your culture in that relationship. So I definitely see the allure of it. I don't know,
Yeah.
we'll have to ask them what it's like dating Persian men. I've heard the good and the bad, so
Yeah, like all cultures, there's good and bad. Yes, and you're doing something that, yeah, that breaks that stereotype, which is so important, and we need
Yeah.
to do more with our own cultures.
Mhm.
What do you see happening with this script, and what's
Yeah.
your dream there doing these
Yeah.
stories?
Obviously, like, I would love to see a mainstream movie about the Persian culture. I mean, we have such beautiful like, if you've never been to a Persian party, like, you're honestly missing out. I feel like we just dance all like, we just are dancers, all we got, music and we just dancing, and so I just would love to see something that's very mainstream and not showing like the typical stereotypes. Yeah, because I think a lot of us too, a lot of us that grew up here, a lot like even our parents aren't necessarily like super religious or I don't know. There's just like this whole side to us that I don't know people understand or realize, and so that's what I would love to do. Obviously, I'd love it to be a Netflix movie, so we'll see.
Yes, that would be amazing. And speaking of the stereotypes, when you face them,
Yeah.
what's your reaction internally or even out loud? And I'm asking this because a lot of us struggle with this. And of course, Iran is going through something
Yeah.
extremely difficult right now. But in general,
Yeah.
immigrants just fight the stereotypes almost every day. Curious on what's your reaction or how has that changed?
Yeah, I think, like, as immigrants, we do have a responsibility. I understand that it could feel you could become very tired of it and, like, having to explain yourself, but, I think a couple things, like, just understanding that like, listen, I have stereotypes about, like, not intentionally, but I have stereotypes about other groups of people that are so, like, come from a good place. So I think that's one of the first things is when someone, like, has a stereotype on you, you can't automatically think bad intent. It's just like what they were exposed to or what they know and whatnot. So while it could be very tiresome to have to explain, I think immigrants, we do have this opportunity to be the best representation of the cultures that we're from and break those stereotypes when needed and just take a moment to pause and not react from a negative place. 'Cause I think that can intensify the stereotype. And if you just take a moment and be like, well, that's what they know, that's what they think. Like, even as an example, it's like it's very hard for me when I watch the news and people say, "Well, the Iranian people," when they're talking about the government, like that just breaks my heart. I'm like, it's so different. Like but that's just what they know. Actually, there's this content creator. She's this Iranian content creator that I love. Her name is Zoya, and she just does such a great job, like representing us. And she just did this piece of content that was so interesting because a lot of people say Iran, but we say Iran. And she's like, I used to always be the pronunciation police. Like, no, it's Iran, not Iran. And then she realized she was like, you know what? My parents that live in America like pronunciate almost every other word wrong. So I should give people a little bit more grace when, they're not pronouncing Iran, Iran. And I think like that grace is incredibly important to have that even as an immigrant, like we come here to this land and it might be very challenging, but we also have to understand, like, we bring in our own set of stereotypes too, and so having grace, I think, is incredibly important.
Yes, you're so right. Checking our own bias, which is the hardest part. And yes, I think it gets to our core when people talk about our own culture, because it's like talking about your family
Yeah,
almost. So
yeah.
it can be very difficult, but you're right. Absolutely. Giving more people grace.
I think that's like having grace for people, but also advocating and speaking up when you need to as well. I think there's also nothing wrong when you're faced with that to say that's absolutely not true and to advocate for your culture and where you're from and the stereotypes. So I don't want to give it a total Pollyanna answer to that. I think both are equally important.
Yes, yes. And there's way that we can say things in a lovable way, and there's a lot of context that can change the situation, of
Yeah.
course. But yes, absolutely agree with
Yeah.
that. I wanna finalize just with a couple more questions. What's next with Small Talk with Sheila? I
Yeah.
am very excited.
Yes, for sure. I am coming back with brand new episodes. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm really leaning into this whole idea of rom-comming your life, really diving into it. So I have a whole series of episodes just about like what it means to be the main character of your own life and embracing that. And it's not just a meme, but what happens when you take that sort of authorship. I also there's just so much happening in work and tech. I want to do a whole series on rom-comming your work life, which I think will be very interesting and very timely right now. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, just continuing to build out the brand. And I do another reason I think I'm so drawn to rom-coms, especially now. I just think there's a lot going on in the world, and there's just a lot of heaviness. And my episodes are pretty short. They're like 15, maybe 20 minutes max. And that, again, that's intentional because I just really think that even in these moments of hardship, ever kind of hardship that you're facing, whether it's with your family, with your health, with what's happening in the world, what's happening at work, there are opportunities to have pockets of joy. And so I just want, like, small talk to be that pocket of joy for people, and to know that joy and grief and anger and sadness can coexist.
Yes, they can. And it's definitely a pocket of joy. And we need more of that content.
Yeah.
Rom-com in your job. I'm very curious about
Yes.
how would that. I never thought about it that way. Very
Yeah.
curious to know more.
We're gonna
Yeah.
go into it because if you think there's a lot of
Yeah.
about work, and we're gonna go into that a little bit and see how people
Right.
rom-com in their work
Yes.
life.
Yeah. What gives you more joy these days, Sheila? What are those buckets of joy for you?
Definitely hanging out with my husband and my dog, having like I love to walk, having my mom, she doesn't they live in the Bay Area, I live in Southern California, so I do like walk and talks with my mom in the morning. So I'm walking and we talk and we catch up. So I think that gives me joy. I don't know, I like to bake a little bit, so I've been baking cheesecake and whatnot. So sometimes just being in the kitchen and being away from technology also just gives me a great amount of joy.
Baking. I love that.
Yeah.
I saw you were eating a cake in one of your episodes. Did you bake that?
That one, no, there's a French place that I got, yeah, yeah, it's very good. But I'm more of a savory person, but I don't like to cook. Like, I don't like chopping things, but for some reason, stirring things I'm okay with. So, I don't know, I just love baking, I don't know, it's just so much easier for me than cooking.
Do you like the Great British Baking Show?
Oh, I haven't watched it. Is it good?
It's so good. It is very joyful.
Okay,
Yeah, one of the best shows. It's just yeah, I think you
okay,
would like it.
I'm gonna go
It's a pocket of joy.
I'm gonna binge it.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I think what you're doing is wonderful. I really mean it. And in so many ways, your honesty is bringing your listeners so much joy and helping as well. And
Thanks so
I love
much.
it.
And I will say I say the same to you. I think, amplifying the voices of immigrants, is so incredibly important, right now. So I'm equally inspired, by the work you're doing. So thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, Sheila. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, awesome.
And bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Sheila is really a reminder that there's a huge difference between blind optimism and the conscious choice to find pockets of joy, even if the world feels very heavy at the moment, and that we don't have to over explain ourselves. We can find our own version of happiness and be messy in the process and take up space. Be sure to listen to Small Talk with Sheila. And if this story resonated with you, please share it with someone that could also need it. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next episode.